Fear Street Part 3, 1666 is the third movie of this Netflix week-to-week trilogy that is wrapping up with this film. This film, once again, stars back from the previous films: Kiana Madeira, Ashley Zuckerman, Jillian Jacobs, Olivia Scott, Welch, Benjamin Flores Jr., Julia Raywald, Fred Heckinger, Sadie Sink, Emily Rudd, and Maccabi Sly, once again directed by Leah Haneke, and tells a story about the origins of Sarah Veer, whose curse has now, we know from the previous two films, has been tormenting Shadysiders for the last 300 plus years. The film is an hour and 55 minutes and is rated R. My name is Max, and welcome to a brand new movie review. We're talking Fear Street Part 3. Please guys like the video. Please hit the like. That is the best way to support this channel. Also, comment down below your thoughts. Let me know what to tell me in the comment section down below after the video is over. Also, please subscribe and ring the bell if you're new to the channel. I do movie reviews, TV show reviews, streaming platform reviews, movie rankings, and a box office breakdown show. If you like any one of those, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications. Also, after I'm done my non-spoiler review, I have to give my positives, my negatives, and my score. I will give you my official ranking of the three films as well. So stay tuned for that as well. And let's get my non-spoiler thoughts of Part 3. So I was pretty pumped up, as you'll see in my ranking. I really do enjoy this. I really have enjoyed this trilogy, and that does not stop with Part 3, 1666. Now, the film is really interesting because I'm not going to spoil anything that happens, obviously, but really the first hour of this movie is 1666 alone. We go back to Sarah Fear in 1666, but because of the ending of Part 2, we had Kiana Madeira's character come back and she touched the hand that we learned was the missing hand of Sarah Fear, and she put herself, basically Sarah Fear made her watch everything from her perspective. So all the actors that are from the first two films, they're all back in different roles in the 1666, but they're not just there because, oh, we're going to connect all these bring all these actors together. It makes sense why each of these characters are cast in their respective roles, and you understand that as the movie. So that already took me back in a good way. It was really interesting seeing all these characters come back together, but in a completely different light. And the way the film is shot in 1666 is so well done. It feels very intense. I think this is easily, in my opinion, the most intense film and maybe the darkest film out of the three so far. It's very intense from start to finish. That's kind of been my main issues with the previous two films. You know, I really love the first film and think the second one's kind of fine. The first acts of both those films are not very good. The first act in the first one was kind of average, and I thought the atrocious first act within the second one. I thought it was very bad in the second one. So it's cool to see a first act that just goes right into really the nitty-gritty of the story, as we learned, because they only have an hour of screen time in this year, because the first hour of this movie is 1666, and the second hour of this movie is the conclusion of the 1994 story. So if you're wondering, how can they conclude stuff that takes place in 1666? They do go back for the second half of the movie, which is, I think, the last 50 minutes to an hour, with 1994 back with our characters who survived the first film. So first of all, I do want to say the biggest positive is the direction and the mystique of the world. As I just said, the film has such a horror vibe to it. It feels off-putting the first hour of this movie. Characters are acting the way that they're supposed to act. If they were hanging around 1660, the way they would call women witches, for what Sarah Fear and her relationship with Hannah goes down. Now, at times, it is a bit too similar to the Dina and the Samantha relationship, but still it's there, and you get why it's such a big deal, obviously, during 1666. Again, some of these actors are doing such a good job. First of all, Kiana Madeira has a lot of screen time in this movie. She might be in every scene of the entire movie. She has a lot to do because she's both playing Dina in the second half of the movie, but she's also playing Sarah Fear in the first half of the movie. So that dual-some performance was actually really good from her. And she gives very similar but different performances, which makes her really, really great. Benjamin Flores Jr. was my standout in Part 1. He's my standout again in the second half of Part 3 in this movie. If you're expecting like Sadie Sink to have a big role in this movie, she really doesn't. She maybe has a scene or two. Her sister has a bit more screen time. But I also want to give credit to Ashley Zuckerman, who plays Nick Good in these movies. He also hit when he plays Solomon Good. I mean, that's the best acting that he has done so far in the trilogy. When he's playing Solomon Good, he's playing Nick Good. He's playing a very stereotypical police sheriff. When he's playing Solomon as a very different character than Nick, and that performance I thought was quite excellent in the movie. As I said, the film is really intense for the first hour of the movie because even though you know kind of what happens, there's still a lot of mystique and mystery with the Sarah Fier character. And when you start unraveling the mystery of what she actually did during 1606 to deserve all of this or to possibly haunt the town, it becomes quite intense on finding these mysteries. And I kind of like that it took more of an intense route. It definitely takes a step back in the horror. I'll get to that in my negatives, but again, I felt right into this movie and I was into it right away. And the second half of the movie was not for me, not as good as the first half, but still had some very fun moments, some really fun action scenes as well. Also, guys, if you are watching this movie, stay until so there's a little bit of fancy credits. Don't turn your Netflix off once you see the credits start rolling. Once you get to the regular old credits, then you can turn it off, but there is a bit of a big tease for a possible next part of the franchise. So definitely stay tuned for that. So let's get my negatives with the film. And one of my big negatives with the movie is there's two really big parts of the movie I do have an issue with. The first part is that it really does take a step back, in my opinion, with the horror. I didn't find this movie at all as scary as the first two films, or as really the first two films really do feel like slasher films, when especially in the third act. And I don't feel slasher at all with this film. Don't get me wrong, there are killings and kids are getting killed, just like the second one. Doesn't matter who you are, man, woman, child, they're all getting killed. But the horrifying elements are kind of the visuals of it, not the actual, oh, I'm scared of this person or anything in particular, just like the first two films. So I found this to be, while it was the most intense for me, it was the least scariest or horrifying of the trilogies thus far. Another big issue I had with the movie is there is obviously a villain, an overall villain who you know from the previous two films, who is revealed to be the villain of the entire trilogy. And it really just didn't work for me. Why something was happening for over and over again. And for me, it just felt like a very disappointing third act, because at times it kind of feels like convoluted of what's actually going on with the villain of the movie. And because he didn't get really, I don't want to get into spoilers, I can't really go any deeper. The villain for me was quite disappointing when you actually think about the trilogy because of the way they set up this character. It didn't feel warranted for this character to be the main villain of the trilogy. That's all I'm going to say as well. As I said, the Sarah Fier Hannah relationship felt way too identical to Dina and Samantha. And at times it felt like you were watching the same movie as the first one. It was really beat to beat the same love relationship that happened in the first one. And obviously they're played by the same actors in the second movie, but it just feels like the same movie for bits and pieces of part three. They're also, because they go back in 1666, I guess it takes place in Ireland or something, all of the characters now have accents, and some do a good job of holding their accents, but some actors have a pretty bad job at holding up some of these accents. I'm not gonna bring up who, and I totally get that going from American to whatever accent, Irish, I guess, is what the movie is, but some of these actors just could not do an Irish accent and hold it for a long period of time. And there's just a lot of one-dimensional characters in the film. The films that are just supposed to be villains and characters who are supposed to be good guys. There isn't any clear. And I also think that the film another issue I have with the movie, and I'm not the biggest fan of part two, as you know, if you saw my review last week, but this film does not help out part two at all. For me, when I finished watching the movie, I was like, couldn't part two just be a flashback movie? Because it feels so meaningless to the actual story, other than getting Gillian Jacobs' character involved in the story. Other than that, though, it does make Fear Street Part 2 at times feel like just a flashback movie, not an actual continuing story. And maybe they should have organized it like this, where they could have had part part 6066 be the second movie in the trilogy, and then end with the ending of 1994, because this movie at times feels like two completely different movies, because the first hour 1666 and the second hour is 1994 part 2. So at times it gets jarring. The first scene, we go back to 1994, it's like, wow, we're going from 1666 to 1994 like that without a beat. It took a little minute, 5 minutes to really get into it again because of the jarring nature of going from two completely different centuries. But overall, guys, I had a really fun time with this movie and the trilogy as a whole. So I'm getting a Fear Street Part 3, 1666, a 3.5 out of 5, guys. A 70% guy, 72%. Let's go 72% for Fear Street Part 3. I really did have a fun time with this trilogy. Once again, I'll give you my ranking right now. Coming in first place for me in the trilogy, I had number 1 was Fear Street Part 1, 1994. Number 2, this movie, Fear Street Part 3, 1666. And in third place is Fear Street Part 2. It was Fear Street Part 2. So 1, 3, 2 is my ranking of the trilogy. Let me know your ranking of the trilogy in the comment section down below. If you've seen this film, tell me, have you seen the films? Are you going to watch them binge fashion if you haven't seen the first 2 yet? Let me know in the comment section down below your non-spoiler thoughts on this trilogy. Please like the video, subscribe, ring the bell. My box office breakdown video will be coming tomorrow. Many more movie reviews, TV show reviews are coming down the pipeline, so you got to ring that bell to notify when these videos come out. If you want to see my just my non-spoiler reviews of the first 2 movies, those are the 2 videos popping up above my head. If you want to see my other movie reviews for the rest of the year, I've seen over 50 films this year. You can click that playlist right to your right. Please enjoy those videos.